Welcome to another episode of the Contractors Innovation Podcast. And I have a good friend, Matteo Forgione, who was a contractor, and we met in the special foundation field. And now our paths have gone in many directions. Me with several different companies, and I still have an interest in. And Matteo does a lot of support for our windmill product. So we're going to talk a little bit about the patents and you're recording now, eh, Dante?
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't think anything's off limits. You know, I decided, Matteo, to sell my Canadian and my US patents.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a serious buyer now, which is probably wouldn't surprise you that, I think Keller might be the one.
Nice.
Because Keller actually has 5 Canadian offices.
Okay.
45 US offices. And they're, as you know, you probably done work with them or around them.
Yeah, around.
Yeah. They're the largest geotechnical contractor in the world. So it'd be pretty good from that standpoint. So Matteo, tell us, let's revert more to, I'm fascinated by your involvement at UMass. I was surprised to hear your 2 or 3 days a week, just because you must enjoy it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even do it if I didn't enjoy it. And it's nice teaching exactly like what my core competencies are, right? Because I don't need to necessarily have everything. I don't need anything scripted. I don't need to be reading off of someone else's notes or slides or something like that. I actually can take the foundational elements of, mechanical engineering, the stuff that I'm really good at. And we have, specific things that we want to cover in the course, and then I can modify and build that into an even better course and things that I can directly talk to on the fly. And when you do that, the engagement is so much better because as I'm talking about something and they're seeing the thought process as an engineer, not as just a teacher, right? So I'm talking through it and they'll ask me a question off the cuff like, well, but how does this work? And I'm like, well, I'll just tell you and I'll walk through it. And I might not even know, but then I'll arrive at the answer with them instead of just being like, oh, it's just this, or I don't know. You'll have to go look that up on your own. So it's kind of fun in that way where it gets exciting. You can see they're like, okay, like they appreciate the fact that I understand the content to the point where I can just talk to any topic and I'm not afraid to discuss it and walk through it and get to the point where I'll be like, maybe at some point I might say, okay, we need to get back on track here, but we could keep going further down this route, So I find ways to distill
narrow the options kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and just go through like the typical engineering process, which is that's all it is. You're just filtering, you're distilling, you're knocking things off that don't apply, right? And saying, well, it has to be this, or this is what applies, or here's the principle, and this is how we're going to do it. So as an example, like I teach this one lesson on or 2 lessons on fits and limits, right? So just how precision parts fit together and how to determine the clearances for those and what the tolerances are so that they will fit guaranteed when you get your parts back. Because engineers make drawings, we put all these tolerances all over the drawings, right? And then parts come back and guess what? Sometimes they still don't fit and everyone wonders why. And then showing them the actual systematic approach from the initial conceptual design, the functionality of whether it's a machine or a mechanism or a laser pointer or whatever it is. Or in this case, I use the second example to dive deep on it. I'm using engine components. So I'm actually walking them through physical components that they have in their hands. And it's like an experiential type lesson. So it's kind of a lab, but it's also a very long lecture at the same time. They would fall asleep if it was just a lecture. It's like an hour and a half. An hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes that I'm actually talking them through this stuff. They can ask questions, but I have physical components that they can play with and see and feel, and they're measuring at the same time. So now they're engaged, and then you let it kind of meander. I have certain points I want to hit, so I'll refer to my notes, just make sure I'm hitting those major points. But at the same time, I'm allowing it to go in other directions. So if all of a sudden a certain lab section is like really interested in motorcycles or whatever, or like they're all lumberjacks and they want to talk about chainsaw engines, I'm going to focus on that, right? So yeah, essentially you can get it to the point where they get to the end and they're literally thanking me. They're like, thank you, like this is great, this is really good, have a nice afternoon, instead of being like, is it done, I'm out of here, right? So trying to find the way to dive deep in these areas. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from other business owners who have, especially fabrication, machine shops, things like that, who have been steadily, the engineering output from universities in general has been more, there's been less focus on like what I call classic machine design, classic mechanical engineering, right? So when you think of mechanical engineers, most people will think of either like a machine designer, someone who actually designs like hardware, machines, mechanisms, pieces and parts. And then there's obviously other things like sprinkler systems and, plumbing and control systems and, thermal fluids. So like jet turbine, like the fluid flow and heat transfer, things like that. So there's all of those, but everything really stems, the fundamentals of it really are, it's just physics. It's like applied physics. So you have to be good at physics if you want to be a mechanical engineer. And which means you also need to know math, right? So physics and math, and then how to visualize and conceptualize and take problems and, distill them down to the point where you can define the problem, which is like 95% of the solution is just defining the problem. And then from there, you just make tasks and just move forward. So I try to give them these very things that I'm still, even when I'm teaching some of these things, I'll have moments where I'm like, now I get it. And I've been doing this for 20 years and I just taught myself something new, and it happens almost every week. So I'm still learning all the time. And which is helpful too, because I've never not been learning new things. So my brain is just able to just keep absorbing more and more information, and every once in a while I have to defragment, I get a little jittery, I have too much stuff. I need to do a data dump, but it's definitely interesting. I like teaching. I like being able to actually add value. If I was there and I was, there's obviously anything within the mechanical engineering, department I could, teach, but there's some things where I'd be like, well, there's probably someone better suited for it. I could fill in, I can cover a lecture, read the notes. I can talk to the stuff because I've learned it and I've done it. But the stuff that I really, really like talking about is digging deep into going from what does someone want a thing to do? They don't even know how it's even going to work. They just say, I want a thing that does this. And then I ask, okay, well, what exactly do you want to do? So we develop performance specification. And then from there, we develop a technical specification. And then from there, we develop the entire design. You do all the engineering, all the detailed designs, and then you build everything out from there. And then you just make it, right? So I try to show them also that that's kind of how it actually works, because a lot of them, until they're junior or senior, they don't even know what the job they don't even know what the job is even going to look like for them. They still don't even understand really why they're even there. So I try to show them examples. I might take 2 or 3 minutes and show a bunch of pictures at the beginning of a lecture and say, hey, just so you know, here's some things that I've designed and built, to give you an idea of what types of things you might do. And here's a couple types of jobs, right? Some examples, because they still don't really understand where it might go. So
That's very interesting. How many students in a class?
110.
Well, that's big.
Yeah, it's broken up, but in the lecture I'll have 80 to 100. Depends on how many show up. So, but typically it could be up to 100.
Is UMass considered a pretty top school in the Eastern Seaboard there for engineering?
For engineering, it's it's known for the engineering department has a pretty big engineering department. So, and then obviously you have the other schools in Boston, like the top names like you would hear, like, MIT and stuff like that, right? So, but it pretty much found, because I have a lot of friends who went to MIT and mechanical engineers, and I'll ask them, hey, when did you learn this, or where did you learn this? And they're like, oh, I learned all that on my own. A lot of things, no matter what, you're not going to be taught it in school. But there's some real key things that it makes sense. Like, we can fit it in, we can squeeze it in, or we can make it a priority. And my current position, I've been able to actually prioritize some of these core things that people are asking for. They want engineers that can make good drawings. They want engineers that can generate, actual real output. No one just wants people sitting around in the office making heat and costing money, right? They want someone that wants to be there. They're engaged. They want to get involved. They want to solve problems, and that's the key. So you just got to get people excited about it. Like I like the stuff that I do. So, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not waking up in the morning thinking like, oh, what am I even going to do today? I'm like, how am I going to even figure out what to do today? I have so many different things I'm working on. And then, so even just deciding how to manage the week and the schedule and the things that come up, because sometimes I get calls. I get a lot of emergency calls. So I'll have stuff that comes up and people are like, can you do this today? Or I need you to be here on Monday because 8 other people are going to be there. And we need to, for like an inspection or something like that, right? And sometimes I have to reschedule things very quickly. So, learning to be agile and not just shut down when things change, I think, engineering is like that, where, we're making decisions based on incomplete data sets, right? We're using our experience and our expertise to be able to say, well, I don't have all the information. I have enough information to know that this would be the way to do it. I'm going to do it like that. And then I'll iterate that a little bit, right? And that's the typical kind of engineering approach, No one has time to spend years doing research to solve some very minor problem, right? So we rely on people with experience, and sometimes it's not even just me. I just make a phone call and ask someone, hey, I'm working on this thing. What do you think about this? And I have a couple projects where I've had to ask like 10 plus people just for their opinion on how they think something, for example, could be repaired, right? And then based on all their opinions, I was able to sort of average that and mix it with the path that I was on and say, okay, I think I have a path forward. I'm going to use this scheme that everyone seems to think would work, and now I'll actually engineer it and detail it, right? But I wanted people's real professional experience who work in that particular space, to understand what they would do if they just had to just do it. Like on Monday, if they had to show up and just do it, right? And it was like a construction project, right? So I'm like, how would you just go about and do it? How would you just fix that, right? So.
Yeah, that's interesting. How's Forgione machine? Busy, eh? You're busy?
Yeah,
How
we're
many
busy.
people?
I mean, we're trying not to be just a machine shop, So we're, we have the machines. We can make any parts that we want, But typically, we're using the machines to make our own product, or a product that's part of, we don't just make parts and then sell them. It's very rare. So it's important for us not to get stuck in that mode where we're just making parts.
That somebody's lawnmower, eh? Is that a lawnmower?
Apparently. He's leaf blowing the parking lot, I guess. So
Oh, no.
he's walking away. I think it'll go away. So
So do you miss the foundation business, Matteo? Like,
yeah, I mean the foundation business was always fun because everything's a problem, right?
yeah.
And that's where I thrive, is when there's a challenge, right? So, and that's where I kind of, cut my teeth in becoming a quick, what I call like kind of like a quick turn innovator. I was always fast to be like, okay, here's a couple ways we could do it, right? We can go very quickly, all right, based on what you told me, here's a couple options, right? But when it's okay, here's a couple options, and also they're like, by the way, it needs to be done by this date because we need to be on the job site, and then we're going to be in the critical path every single time because you can't build the bridge if the foundation's not there, and you can't put the high rise up if the foundation's not there. So, and then they're like, well, we also included the fact that we needed to buy this equipment, modify this equipment. You make a design and make a bunch of tools and all that stuff that don't exist, and you have to do that, but it's been undefined. But we told them that we would do it so that we could do the job, and now you're stuck in the middle, right? So, and that was fun because at the time, you know, in that particular time, we had like a really unbelievable crew of people, you know, at Hub, between the mechanics, the fabricators, the operators, you know, everyone in the company, you know, and it was small enough that we could be very agile, and you know, we could just innovate and just make whatever we wanted. We were making all our own tools, we were modifying equipment. I'd be going to Italy every year, buying new equipment, bringing it in, and even that stuff, sometimes we would be making attachments and things for it. So it's really, really fun, you know, and really, it's the drilling part of it is just drilling. I mean, anyone can just get a drill rig and drill holes in the ground, you know. If you have enough money, just buy the stuff and you just drill holes in the ground, like, you know. But to do it and not have, like, the best way to look at it is, can you do the work without having any rework at all? You know, that's how I always looked at it, you know. Can you do it and never, whenever we, you know, you leave a job and it's a foundation job, for these deep foundations, like, you never ever want to hear from anyone ever again about it. You know, you might want to you'll drive by it in 10 years and say, yeah, I did that for that building, or I did this bridge or whatever, but you never want a phone call. If someone calls you in 2 years, it's probably because there's a problem and something's settled. Like, look at, there's been major buildings that have had issues in the US, you know, nothing that I was involved with, but in California and some other places, and it turns into complete nightmares, you know. So so can you do the work? Can you have no rework, no injuries, right? Maybe you make some money on it, great. But my mindset is always, if you do a good job, you're going to end up making money, rather than try to make money first and then hopefully you do a good job, right? Sometimes those priorities get inverted. So everything I do is based on, you know, the mission, you know, client success, quality, maintaining my reputation, right? People come to me because I have a good reputation, right? I'm honest, transparent, you know, technically savvy, large network, a lot of resources, a lot of know-how in different areas, willing to learn, willing to try things that no one else will do. So that being the case, in the end, it's almost a guarantee that, you know, I may not, you know, I'm not going to become filthy rich doing that type of stuff, because there's ways that you can become, you know, incredibly wealthy doing things that are, you know, illegal or whatever you want. You know, there's plenty of industries that are like that, right? It's very easy to do if you want. And this stuff comes up all the time. People will be like, oh yeah, so-and-so asked me to, you know, sign something or do this or whatever for $5,000 or $10,000. It's like, you can't. As soon as you do it once, you know, you're on the wrong side of the fence, right? So you have to just, you have to, you know, as an engineer, we have a responsibility, you know, I mean, I'm also a licensed engineer, but just as an engineer in general, right, we have a responsibility, a duty of care to, you know, basically, like, do no harm, and make sure that nothing that we do causes any damage to, you know, property, people, you know, life, all that stuff, right? So it's a big deal, you know. I take that seriously, and like, you don't want to be in any situation where you're ever compromised with that, right? So
How's the Hub was bought by Solitas, right?
yeah, Solitange bought Hub, and so yeah, I mean, they're busy. They've got a lot of people. They've got tons of work. I
How
don't
many
know.
people? How many people would be there now?
I think
Got.
they have over 125, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so which for this area is huge. I mean, you know, it's probably the biggest that has ever existed in terms of a foundation drilling company in New England, you know, or at least definitely in Massachusetts. So
Yeah, that's it's very interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
HCM is probably 500 people now.
really,
Yeah,
wow,
I definitely got squeezed out at the wrong time for that. But Jason was a sharp guy,
yeah,
or is a sharp guy,
yeah. It's a
and
different ballgame
they
when
got
there's 500
lots of
people,
backing.
right?
Yeah,
Totally
they did a
different.
big, yeah, they did a big acquisition and needed more shops, and
Yeah,
I think they had 6 BG36s, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed in how some of it went relative to design. Stuff's over designed, at least in Toronto. And I
Yeah.
don't know whether that's Canadian engineers, but when the Luffer casing came in, everything was a Luffer casing, right?
Yeah.
In the 80s, we used to do things with just regular casing. And we'll talk a little bit about the stuff we work on together, Matteo. By the way, I don't know if you see it, Dante, but I sent a picture of a windmill that I put on LinkedIn recently. That it was FEGO Wind 1.0. Do
Okay,
you see it, Matteo? Do you see it? I don't know if
I see
who
it.
should. Can you share it? Just for the sake of
Um,
getting it into the recording. I don't know if
yes, give me 1 second. I will open this up. Oops, give me 1 second.
I get a lot of interest on LinkedIn now, Matteo, with
Yeah.
what we're doing, particularly the geothermal. It's really a game changer because it's got a higher COP. Like a
Right.
COP typically with glycol is 2.5, but with water, we're getting with Andrea. I invited him, by the way. He's pretty busy. He's doing the heat exchanger work for 2 nuclear plants,
Hmm.
but he's a really good engineer in uh, in heat exchange and has helped me a lot. So the COP equals 5 of this thing, and basically you could scale it because it's a caisson drill. Instead of doing one glycol hole mud drilling a day, you can do 5 30-ton units a day. With let's say a 72-inch outer casing. And I don't know if you've seen the recent designs. I should share them with you at some point, but that's I think
How's, how's
that's
have you
go
done
ahead.
anything new at your shop, like at your place, in terms of like systems or any um, ideas that have come from operating the stuff at your place?
Well, certainly, I basically what not to do, right?
Yeah,
Like
sure. That's what the
which is
prototypes are for, right? Figure out what.
very valuable. What happened when I don't know if we ever had this conversation. I thought we may have, but what happened was I had a 20-inch outer casing bolted, and you can't have anything bolted in a high pole magnet windmill system. It has to be very rigid. So I developed thinking that was more rigid in terms of pipe and then more gravel. And I hit at my place, I never had any soil investigation. So I ended up hitting high water table,
Right.
which made it really challenging.
Hmm.
And we managed to get it working a couple of times relative to critical speed for that high pole magnet system is maybe 300
Right.
RPM. But we needed to move into the 2.0 version. I actually took the other one down and I made it put it on my front lawn kind of thing as like a museum and put a sign on it
Yeah, yeah.
coming soon FEGO in
Like the
2.0.
Lamborghini tractor out in front of the Lamborghini factory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am going to order one, Matteo, and there is that guy that got the quote last year that I'm pretty sure he's going to order one. It doesn't help that this one ended up being on the front lawn,
Sure.
but people are noticing it. I'm lining up to get some shred money, which should help me pay my bill with you. So the shred is a Canadian program, science, research, education, and development. I'm just submitting now, finally
Okay.
getting my accountant to do it. And but you've got that design, I think, the design was based on 10 kilowatt, Matteo.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you think that I'm almost thinking that 5 kilowatts a ton of power, eh? In a wild wind situation? Like I'm in a windy area.
Mhm.
So then it boils down to more about battery. Like I
Yeah, it's
have
what are you going to do with the energy? Can you consume it, while it's windy? If it's windy all the time, you need to have an output or you need to sell it back to the grid. It's got to go, it's got to go somewhere, right? Otherwise, you're just making heat, essentially, which, or you just have to turn it off, which you'll see, sometimes, you'll see um, turbines, they just put the brakes on, right? They just leave them off because sometimes it has nothing to do with the turbine itself. It just could be something to do with grid related issues, or they can't move the power, so they can't turn it on. So
Yeah. So you need to have, well, Andre and I have been playing with different concepts. Like, you could actually do the FEBTU cell
mhm.
in a building shaft. Like
Right.
you don't really need to have soil.
Yeah.
The temperature of the soil isn't that big a deal in terms of, it's interesting some of the concepts we've come up with. I should send you something. I'll get Andrea. Have a look, actually. There's a document I just prepared. I call it a prospectus
Yep.
with all my patents.
Okay.
And I'll send it probably in a week,
Sure.
just to make sure you have it. I'm sure you're pretty good at storing files
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean,
but I
one of the options that would be interesting is you run, your, generator up on your windmill setup, and then you use that and you run a compact, high energy flywheel where you could do energy storage there. It has to be in a vacuum, like there are companies that make these things, can't go too big because it becomes a little bit ridiculous, but you get quite a bit of energy, and you get a highly balanced, vacuum setup. I was working with some people who were looking into doing some of that, and it'd be interesting if you were able to, because now you have you're not dealing with a chemical battery, you're just dealing with pure inertia, right? So essentially just run the thing up to speed, very, very high speed motor. It's going to take a long time to get up to speed, right? But eventually you get that thing up to speed, and then, you can just keep it running, and then you just balance the power, and then you can take any extra power beyond that. So usually they use flywheels for grid stabilization, so they'll use it it's basically acting as kind of a capacitor, right? So they'll put them in, and I think there's been some pretty big ones installed. But yeah, it's tricky, individual power generation is tricky. I always thought, one of the nice things to do would be to make because they're so dense in terms of like size of device to the amount of power you can get, is micro, very, very small gas turbine, just natural gas turbines, right? Where you can use like a methane, you can generate your own methane digester, right? And just run a gas turbine, very low power. I think the other problem is that people we just use too much of everything, just in general. I mean, just obviously I'm involved with all this construction and high tech and defense and whatever, all these things, right? And it's all fascinating. But just because it's fascinating, it's like sometimes I look at it and say, what are we even doing here at all? Like what is the point? And you see what I'm doing at home. I've got thousands of tomatoes, I've got greenhouses, I've got bonsai trees, I've got hundreds of house plants, right? I've got farm animals, right? So it's like I'm living in two different worlds, completely different worlds at the same time, right? Where the reality of the situation is, I don't want to be involved with any of the technology or any of this stuff. But you can't not, because of the way that, technology dominates the modern societal construct. I mean, everything revolves around technology. And I think honestly, at some point in time, there was probably a time in the 80s or 90s where everyone would have been just fine if we just stopped technology development. Like it was just good enough, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
firewood still works.
yeah,
We might need to get there again. I still burn a lot of wood.
yeah. Me too.
I
I
have
mean,
I have a wood over oil furnace, and it
yep.
works really well.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do with the? I mean, even not even on purpose. I mean, I have more wood than I can burn every year just from doing maintenance, just tree maintenance, right? It just happens every once in a tree dying or this, or it's in a bad spot, or one falls, or I need to thin something out, and it's just and I'm just getting more wood than I can even burn, so yeah, and it's like it's interesting too. I live in an antique farmhouse. The original house was built in 1790, right? And so at some point you look at it and say, like, why not just cut the lines to the house and just use the dug well that's under my dining room, and just make a sand filter and carbon filter, and you could do that. That's a little extreme, but sometimes I like to look at things at the extremes, be like, what's the extreme for this way? The other extreme would be brain chip implants and holographic lenses on my eyes all day and, some AI thing guiding me through my life. And I'm just sitting in a chair like the movie Idiocracy, so no one's doing anything, it's a total like technocratic society. And that's absolutely a nightmare, obviously. That's kind of unfortunately where we're headed, but it's, you got to find a balance. But, you can control your own kind of sphere and bubble, like I can control that stuff, on my own property, right? I can work with plants, I can work with animals, I can turn my phone off, I can just go outside and just, for 12 hours straight and just work in the yard if I want, but I think
that's what you do on weekends?
yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah,
what are your kids doing? Are any of them technical?
yeah, they're all pretty good, technical wise. They obviously are exposed to the stuff that I do. They see the things I do. They're naturally curious. So if they have a question about something, they'll ask and they'll want to know what it is. So, even when they were younger, we'd be driving around and I'd be like, oh, check that out. Like they just put the rebar down and the next step, they're going to put concrete on that bridge, and then we'd be driving, a couple of months later and my daughter would be like, oh, look at that. They poured the concrete over the rebar over there. She was like 7, like most kids don't even know. They're not even paying attention. They're looking at the TV screen on the back of the headrest in the van or something like that. And we purposely, when we bought our first minivan and the second one, we got the one that has no DVD player, no screens, right? I was like, I'm not going to do it. My oldest is going to be 16 in December, and because she's now in driver's ed, I'm going to be driving within the next, let's say 6 months or whatever. We just got her a phone. Other than that,
good for you.
Yeah, there's no phones. They're like, I need a phone. I'm like, there's a house phone over there. Use the landline. I was like, here's a list of phone numbers. Call someone. I'm like, what they really want is a screen to suck to their face, right? They don't understand that what a phone, is this. That's a telephone,
Yeah.
They should rebrand the modern phone to just something else. So yeah, and they're all, my kids are all homeschooled,
Well, they are, eh? Good for you. Is that to avoid the vaccine?
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons.
yeah. Well, no, I mean it's there's obviously other things that would cause be issues with that, but it avoids a lot of different stuff. But the main thing with it is that we're able to like from an education point of view, right? So for example, one of the things when I was growing up, I was able to spend a lot of time doing things I wanted to do, right? So for example, when I got into skateboarding, I spent a lot of time skateboarding. My parents would notice that I liked to skateboard, so then they would be like, oh, well, if you really want to do that, you can do it. And they would bring me to the skate parks and they would do what they could to let me do that. And I got really good and I ended up,
What was your highest? You won stuff, eh? Like you were.
No, I mean, I like in the Boston area, like in the local pros and stuff like that. We would compete in contests here, but I was with Red Bull and Oakley and Eastern Border and Worship Skateboards, and I'd skate demos and I'd travel and do all sorts of stuff, and it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and and I did some stuff that no one had ever done before. There's still some tricks that that people just they maybe if they found a video of me doing it and were like, oh, that's a good idea, they could try it, but no one even thought of some of the stuff. It was kind of cool, it's fun, so but yeah, and in the Boston area here, there's a whole crew of people who are like would be considered like infamous in this area as skaters, so it's not cool to be part of that, a lot of fun people, but yeah, I mean, and but they would allow me to sort of gravitate towards what I wanted to do.
What did your dad do?
My dad was in construction.
He was, eh?
Yep, yeah. So I grew up on job sites. I grew up like, he'd be building houses or building this, building that, whatever. His friends were all contractors, kind of construction guys, right? And so like if we were building a go-kart and we needed something welded, his buddy who was a welder would show up in his service truck and weld the stuff right in our driveway for us. Me and my brother would be like, awesome, it's super funny. And he'd bring home 5-gallon buckets full of nails for us to straighten. He'd never buy us nails. He'd bring home all the pulled nails from the job site. We'd straighten them all with a hammer in the driveway, and we use those to build our tree forts. So, most people don't even know how to straighten a nail. I've straightened about 1 million of them, right? So, but with my kids, when they get into stuff, if I notice they're getting into it deep, I just let them go. So instead of being like, you should be doing your math, if they're really into drawing, let's say like caricatures or anime or this or that or whatever, I'll just let them do it. Let them do it. You can always learn anything you want if you really want to do it, right? So why be like, oh, you need to be doing your math now, or you need to be doing this now. And then I see the effects, right? They get very skilled and they can focus for a long time on something, which is actually more important than just learning a bunch of random stuff. They're also all violinists. My oldest is first violin, first chair in the Lowell Youth Orchestra that plays at UMass Lowell. It's
You have 2 kids, 2 girls?
Three daughters.
3 daughters, wow. Yeah. Fantastic.
And my oldest, she plays like 5 instruments. And she
Is there any way you can you share a picture of your family?
I don't share any
No,
pictures.
you don't do that.
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't share any pictures of them anywhere. So, yeah.
Dante, can you share that windmill picture?
So
that
the windmill,
custom?
I have it up. I will have to add it in later, but I made a
Okay,
note
so
of
just
when to
add
add
it
it.
add it to the notes then, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So
Would
I'll add
be-
that. It's just because the way the meeting is set up, I would have to close the Zoom and then reopen it to be able to allow it to thing. But for next time, we'll be able to pull stuff up, no problem. But I have the photo, it's downloaded.
Okay.
I did want to ask you a question because one thing that I've noticed, especially with and not so much engineers, but people that are super close to the tech field, is like they always get to a point where it's like they've been, around all this tech and they're like, actually, I want to go back to the old ways. I don't even want my car anymore. I want I want a horse and a
Yeah.
a carriage, Why do you think that's something that always ends up happening to like people that are around so much tech or engineering?
I think we end up in the field because we don't understand. We don't have a high level, like a philosophical understanding of the world we live in when we're young,
Hmm.
right? We have a perception that is based on what we see and how we grow up, right? So if I grow up seeing my parents go to work every day and there's food on the table and you just follow that's just it. You just see it's pattern recognition, right?
Hmm.
You're just seeing the pattern, and that's so behavior comes from the patterns, right? And it's just habits essentially, right? You just kind of become wired, your brain starts to absorb these things. So essentially, for me especially, when I was on the road a lot on these drilling jobs, I'd be driving up into Vermont or hours and hours and hours.
Hmm.
I would typically be driving like 700 to 1,000 hours a year, and then in all that time, I would either be on the phone, or, and a lot of times those are conversations figuring things out, right? Talking to people on jobs, talking through things, getting ready for what we're going to do tomorrow, in 3 days, in a week, in a month, or whatever. And the other times I was listening, typically to philosophy, like lectures on philosophy and all these other things. It's always educating myself. I love really long. Like I will look for the longest possible audiobooks that there are.
Mm.
I want them to be like 30, 40, 50 hours long, and like exhaustive on certain subjects. And what I found is that, after doing that for a very long time, a lot of research and getting into these different things, and then starting to find that as all of those topics have a timeline, right? So they have a chronology. If you look at them all as verticals next to each other along the same timeline, and
Hmm.
each subject itself can stand alone, but you start to see the connections between them, and you start to see like the causality back and forth and how they interacted with each other, rather than looking. And if you look at it as one big thing without looking at each one individually that deep, you won't actually
Hmm.
see all the connections. You'll just have like a general story. So you have like a general picture of the world. And I'm looking at it in terms of like, okay, I've got, for example, listen to something like 40 hours on the Roman Empire, right? Another 40 hours on the history of the United States, and 12 hours on, free will versus determinism, right? Law, all these different things, right? And all these different areas, and then you start to actually see, oh, it's kind of interesting. Like the philosophers really sort of influenced the modern laws that we see in England, especially, which became, you know, common law, and, you know, obviously Canada, of course, but in the U.S. as well. Those systems kind of came from there. You know, general just morality in general. You know, there was a time when there really wasn't any morality. It wasn't really like a thing. It was just, everything was just based on power. It's feudal, right? It was, I want this and you have it. I'm stronger than you, so I'm going to take over your whole place and whatever, just kill everyone, burn everything, and that's just the way it was. You know, it was interesting because if you read like The Prince by Machiavelli,
Yeah.
it's the whole thing is just essentially just people just killing each other in the Italian peninsula for like that's all the story is. It's just
At least 300 years. Just
yeah, it's a
this guy's going to this town. Make sure
yeah,
the peasants like you and the aristocrats like
yeah.
you, and finding that balance
And
somehow.
I'll never forget, actually, I was on a job site and I went in and I talked to my pile driver foreman and I was like, man, I'm reading this and it's fascinating. I was like, it would be like, we're over here in Somerville and we want the, you know, city of Cambridge is over there across the river. And we just decide today, hey, you know what? Yeah, that's going to be ours. We just go over, just take it, you know, that was
Yeah.
it. Like just, those were the decisions. There was no, is it moral? Are we going to get arrested? Is it going to be, there was no, you know, there was no general, you know, morality sort of, you know, is really interesting, you know, and I, you know,
Hmm.
just touching the surface of that's interesting. Never mind diving deep into it. But then over time, and at any point in time, there have always been key people who have questioned that stuff, right? You know, right, all the way back to like Lao Tzu and, you know, in China, right?
Hmm.
Obviously like Buddha, and then anyone else in these different, you know, philosophical or religious sort of positions, right? So, and you know, some people pretty good ideas, some people some pretty bad ideas, right? So, but like anything, everything is, it has to be in balance. So you can't have good ideas without bad ideas. It doesn't
Yep.
work like that. If they're all good,
Hmm.
then they're all bad. Like it's, you know, whatever. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How's
Yeah.
the work with the military now? Do you have anything interesting? I always like asking you about that.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is to do with electronics that are used in uh, mostly like Air Force related stuff, so aircraft. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that's the majority of the stuff I'm doing. I do a lot of work with very high end electronics. So we make, you know, developed a lot of tools and processes that are used to do extremely small, very fine work. I'm talking like needlepoint size features that get worked on in these devices that go into aircraft and other and they go into other things as well. But yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's kind of, but it's like anything. It's just like if you look at just the thing I'm working on, it's just another problem someone has. They have a little bit of a challenge. They're having, you know, maybe trouble, you know, always making it, you know, repairing it or always getting it correct, right? And they're like, why can't we make it better? Why can't we reduce our scrap rates? Why can't we have higher quality? And as the technology goes further and further and further, everything gets smaller and smaller and smaller, more dense. So all of a sudden, if you need to go and do something that typically, like, let's say, for example, you have a big electronics board and you have these big wires going to it, they would be connected with screw terminals, right? It's going with a screwdriver. Right? If I need to move a wire, I just unscrew it and put a new wire in. In this case, I'm talking about wires that are 1,000th of an inch in diameter, right? So
Wow.
a third to a quarter of a human hair, and they're pure gold, and they're right, and you can't even see them if you actually look at. You have to look under magnification to see them. There's thousands of them on there, and so we're even developing processes to make those bonds between the gold to gold interface better. Like that's, I was just in California 2 weeks ago. I presented a paper on that to do with modification, you know, controlled modification of gold to gold surfaces to create stronger wire bonds. And you know, in 2017, I didn't even know what that industry even was. I had no idea. If you ask me what I'm doing now, then I would be like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. Microelectronics, I have no idea. you know, and now I have standard product that's used by the top companies, you know. I've got a 50-page catalog actually of product, and we don't publish it. You have to request it. We don't put it on the web. But yeah, it's wild to think that I went from going from zero to all those things. And the whole thing is that I have people in these companies that they want to fix the problem, right? They see it as a challenge, and then they want me to get on the team, in the mission to fix the problem. And I'm like, great, let's do it, right? So there's this like kind of team mission based, you know, vibe happening there, and that's fun. So it doesn't matter what it is. And like what I found is that when you're working with the right people in that type of situation, we have a very high success rate in solving the problem. And every once in a while, there's one where we're like, that just wasn't a good idea. We just put it on the shelf. We'll keep it, keep a piece on the cabinet over here to look at, to remind ourselves, whatever. But sometimes you're like, yeah, it just didn't work. It wasn't worth it. Whatever, just scrap it. You know. But probably 90 to 95% of the stuff works at probably a B+ level first, right out of the gate, which is pretty good. You know, and you know, B+ is better than most first round, right? So. And then at that point, if we know where we're at and we know where to go, we can make it an A or an A+ pretty quickly. So,
what do you think? I watch a lot of podcasts, and I watch, you know, I'm concerned about World War III and things like that.
yeah,
And we can just assume that it's not going to happen, but it sure seems like Iran and Russia have great technology. Do you follow any of that?
there's a lot of smart people everywhere. You can't take it for granted. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of smart Russian scientists. You know, there's
There's a lot of smart Iranians too.
yep, there's tons of smart Iranians. There's tons of smart, you know, people in every country. There's a percentage of people who are geniuses, right? They're going to become scientists. They're going to become engineers. They're going to become doctors. You know, all these high end fields, right? Very, very, very skilled. And even in places where they're not even on the map. You know, there's countries that no one even knows the name of, and they guarantee you they have geniuses there. You know, it just is what it is. You know, it's a statistical situation. You know, you're going to have so many people are just going to be born and they'll have the capability to become that. You know, it doesn't mean they can. So again, the environment shaping issue is a problem, right? So, like, for example, like. I have the capacity to do what I do, but would I be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have the opportunity, if I didn't meet the right person at the right time, or say yes at the right time, or say no at the right time? You know, those are all important there. And I actually can look back at major decision points in my life where I'm like the whole reason that I'm here is it can stem all the way back to one decision, and then I can see another decision where I'm like, if I made a decision differently there, I would be in a completely different parallel path, not even close. Like the skateboarding versus engineering thing, right? I wasn't going to go to college. I was just going to go to California and go skateboarding, and I ended up going to UMass Lowell as an engineering student. You know, and the only reason why was because my physics teacher in high school basically was like, "You are so good at physics." He's like, "You need to become a mechanical engineer." And I was like, "Okay." I just took his word for it. You know, I was just like, all right, I guess. I mean, I was like, you seem to be pretty confident. I was like, I guess I'll go for it, you know? And I did, and that's what I do. So it's kind of funny when you think about that. It's like very casual, nonchalant decision. But then at the same time, I was still actively skating. I met people, you know, along the way, and, you know, saw, you know, a guy who I used to skate with all the time, and he was a big wig with Red Bull. And he was just like, hey, he's like, would you be interested in doing this with me? And I was like, sure. Boom, there you go. Like just a yes. If I said no that day, I only saw him every once in a while, every few months, maybe once every 3, 4, 5 months.
He did a Red Bull Matteo skateboard, right? Is that
No,
right?
that's totally different. The skateboards, that's all from another company. But I ended up being with Red Bull for 4 years. You know, I was working with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was working with them in their marketing department, sports marketing. Bringing athletes in from all over the world, you know, managed their biggest account in the U.S. in Pennsylvania for like 3 years on site. I would skate demos, and I was basically like, because Red Bull's whole idea was always, and still is to some extent. Like you notice you don't see a lot of Red Bull ads. Every once in a while, you'll see an advertisement that do like the Red Bull gives you wings little cartoon. But other than
Yeah.
that, nothing, right? And why do they do no ads? It's because they basically get, and especially now, it's absolutely out of control. They have these athletes because it's gotten so unbelievable what they can even imagine to do, which if you can imagine it, you can do it eventually, figure it out. And they put a
Hmm.
lot of money and research into the stuff, and they have huge teams. And that's where you see these videos of just unbelievable things that they have people doing, jumping out of airplanes, the flying wingsuits, the guy who jumped from the balloon from space,
Jump
uh,
first. Yeah, the
just
stunts themselves are the advertisement.
that's the
I've seen,
advertisement, right? So that was their whole thing,
yeah,
and they've stuck to that. That was the thing, was it was the can and the athletes, the stunts, the action, right? And it's cool, and everyone loves that stuff. Like everyone knows that if someone's like, "Oh, did you see the video of the guy doing the craziest thing ever?" And they're like, "Oh, it must be a Red Bull video." Like you're just by default, you know that Red Bull funded it. You know it's a Red Bull athlete because they just stuck to that. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah.
So, like Sandro Diaz, who's a Brazilian pro skateboarder, just they did you see the one they turned the side of a building that looked like a ramp into a ramp,
Yes.
and he dropped
Yep.
in on it.
Yeah.
Insane.
Insane. Are you keeping up with skateboarding these days? Like, do you still watch
Yeah,
it at
yeah,
all?
because I have a lot of friends who are like my age who are still active pros.
Okay.
So I'm always like they're always posting stuff online. I'm feeding, watching their feeds, interacting with them. If I see them post something that's like absolutely sick, I always send them a message like, dude, that's awesome, like sick, and then
Yeah.
it's fun, it's good. You have because that's what skateboarding is. Like skateboarders, if the world was run by skateboarders, you wouldn't have this World War III situation going on. Like everyone's just so chill. Like even if you're like competitive, you're not really. Everyone's just trying to like you're excited for everyone, and you're like, well, you are really good at doing that trick. And instead of being like, I'm jealous, I wish I could do that, you'd be like, well, I'm really good at doing this trick. And instead of them being jealous of me, they're like, that's sick. Be like, that's
Hmm.
awesome. Like, and you cheer each other on, even if you're competing against each other in a contest. And there was an article my friend Manny, who was from Lowell. He actually used to work down the street in the metal fab shop. He's a welder in a iron and steel place down the street. He's a pro skateboarder, Manny Santiago, and he was in the Tokyo Olympics, the first Olympics for skateboarding. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. But I thought it was interesting that someone wrote an article after the Olympics, and the author said that skateboarding didn't need the Olympics, but the Olympics needed skateboarding because people didn't realize until they saw the skaters interacting while they were competing with each other how good they were with each other and how the culture is. And the
Hmm.
skater culture is very good. Like no one cares. You could come over here and run me over with your car, and I'm laying on the ground half dead. And if you got out and and I saw you at a skateboard or like you were wearing Vans shoes, I'd be like, "Yo, do you skate?" And you'd be like, "Yeah." And I'd be like, "Oh, we're cool." Like I'd be like, "It's cool. I'll be fine. I'll shake it off." But if you were just a normal person, I'd just be calling my lawyer. So, uh, and it's totally true. Like
It is.
if I'm on a skateboard and I get hurt, I'm not suing anyone. I don't, yeah, like it's my fault. That's just the way it
Yeah.
is.
Unless it's a scooterer.
That is correct. That's 100% correct. Yeah.
Dante, did you skateboard, Dante? Are you a skateboarder?
I skateboarded a little bit when I was younger, but my younger brother, he kept up with it, right? So like, growing up, we would go to the skate park together, all that stuff, and then I ended up going over to like inline skating for a bit. But like me and my brother, we always watched the X Games, we always watched skateboarding and
Nice.
everything. And we still kind of keep up with it. Like my brother still skateboards to this day,
Yeah.
so he's really stuck with it. I went another route and started doing other things, but like, I'm still, I guess, privy to the skateboard culture in a way through him and just interests, you know.
And it's like anything now with any of the sports, everything is just absolutely beyond, you look at the consistency and the skill level and also and people taking care of their bodies, figuring out better ways to heal faster, eating healthier,
Yep.
doing things like that. And they're able to just, it's like they're like superhumans. I mean, if you look at what we're doing today in terms of athletes compared to 20 years ago, you'd think everyone's just Jason Bourne, you know?
I just saw, did you see the video? There was a video of Tony Hawk who's like, I think mid 50s, mid to
Yep.
late 50s, and he does like a flip outside of the half pipe and
Yeah,
like
up onto
sticks
his
the
feet on the
landing.
ramp. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, it's wild stuff.
insane.
Yeah,
That's very cool. I had no idea, that whole, like a whole world that I hurt my knee playing football.
yep.
Mhm.
By the way, physics was my favorite subject, but I took
Physics
it
is
into
awesome. Physics is
civil
great.
engineering. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
could do well if you listen to the professor. Like if you have a good guy,
yeah,
and it all makes sense, eh? That's the thing, eh?
yeah,
There's no lack of truth to it. That's for sure.
yeah.
Where do you think the U.S. is going? Trump seems to be doing a good job. Like I like him, but some people don't.
Yeah, I mean,
My sisters don't like him.
yeah. I mean, the general system is just broken, and the whole system is broken, and it's too big, right? So, you know, we're kind of, I mean, I think we've been stuck in a rut for a long time in general, like overall, and that's not just the U.S. Almost, just globally, right? It's like you're stuck in a rut, you're stuck on these paths, right? There's a certain thing, and you almost can't stop it. So, I don't know. I mean, it would be a whole nother, not really I don't think it's necessarily the right uh,
Topic.
topic for right now, because I could probably go on for about 3 hours on it. But but it's definitely, I mean, let's put it this way though. In Even though the U.S. has its problems, right, and even though some of them are getting worse, as a U.S. citizen, I think it's interesting when people still will complain about things when they can't put into perspective how bad some other places have it and some other people have it, right? It's very hard until you actually see with your own eyes, how bad it can really be, or if you've ever been homeless, or you ever, had these situations, or you've been in a place that's just being bombed all the time, or you come from a place where there literally is no option for anything ever, so I think it's kind of funny when, we have people on it, social media, saying like, oh, this is the worst place ever, I'm going to leave. And it's like, you don't even know. I'm like, you really, the fact that, and I remember actually a long time ago, there was a kid from some other country, and when we were skateboarding, he was a teenager, and he was from somewhere, and he was like, oh yeah, he's like, he was visiting the U.S. skating, and he's like, yeah, we used to skate this spot over here, and he's like, but it got blown up last week, like just like casual. He was just like, yeah, it's gone. It was like hitting an airstrike, and I'm like, what? Like, can you imagine being like, my favorite skate spot just got bombed, and that's the type of stuff. I think in general though, I think just people need to just chill out, the fact that I think the society's been desensitized to death and war a little bit too much, there's no physical response or emotional response at all when you just see, any war or anything like that. And, I mean, I think that, video games have helped a lot with that situation for sure. People are just like, yeah, whatever. It's like, what's the difference between me shooting someone on a computer? And it's the same mindset. I bet the brain is probably in the same potential mental state at that point, right? A little bit, there obviously are differences, and you'd have to talk to some soldiers who have been in the field to understand that, or do some studies. But yeah, it's just in general, you look at, how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your energy? Why are you going to waste your time being, wanting to cause death and destruction when you could do just something that doesn't bother anyone? Or just, so I don't know. It's a deep topic. Obviously it's been, and it's not a new topic. These are the same things that have been happening since the beginning of civilization, even though now it's just high tech. Before it was hand to hand. You go and smash each other with rocks in the head. Now we, have airplanes, right? And other things. We still have satellites and lasers and stuff, right? So same problem, higher tech, but humans are humans. Like, humans don't change. You know what I mean? Like The only thing that keeps everyone in check really is the fear of, either being imprisoned or the fear of dying. I mean, honestly, like most people can't manage their own, actions unless they have some disincentive. Think about it, right? So, and the people who can manage themselves without having to be, disincentivized would be like the people you would consider like the sages. You know what I mean? These are like the wise, like a wise person who's just like, no, I can just be, I can just do my thing. Like, I don't need to make decisions based on like, oh, well, if I do that, I might end up in prison, or if I do that, I might end up dead. There's not making my decisions based on something else. But again, like this is, now you get into like philosophical stuff. It's, I could go on forever with this stuff. So I'll cut that one off.
Yeah, well, it's been a great podcast. Thanks again, Matteo, for sharing all your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'll end it with hoping everything works out for you this year. And
Yeah,
not get into
it'll be what it is, right? It's like, it's just like I'm just waiting for what's next, and but. I'm lucky today. It's Friday. The sun's shining, actually pretty good. It was pretty nasty early in the week and last weekend. So I didn't even look at the weather for the weekend, but I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking it's going to be pretty good, which means, moving around, I'm going to clean the tomato plants out of the greenhouse, get that all ready. I'm going to be using the high tunnel to store some, all the outdoor bonsai trees for the winter, turn the thermostat down, put some shade fabric up because you can't let it get hot. And, go do some stuff and see if I can relax a little bit. I sort of compartmentalize the things I work on. If I'm working on, farm and garden, I'm just doing that. I'm not thinking about this stuff at all. If I'm working on this, I'm not thinking about that. It's just trying to be in the moment, present, doing what I'm doing. So it's kind of how I roll.
Totally cool. Love you, bud. And you take care. Right?
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good weekend, guys.
Have a good one.
Baby, I need to know.